It was supposed to be just another ordinary Tuesday evening. I had come home from teaching my third-grade class, kicked off my shoes, and started chopping vegetables for the stir-fry David always loved. The house smelled like garlic and soy sauce, and I remember humming our song, the one we danced to at our wedding 12 years earlier. When David walked through the door that night, his face was different. Not tired from the garage. Not stressed about bills, just empty. He didn't even sit down. He stood in the doorway of our tiny kitchen with his hands in his pockets and said the words that ripped my life in half. "Emily, I'm leaving. I've met someone else." I laughed at first. I actually laughed because it sounded so ridiculous. This was David, my David. The man who proposed to me on one knee in the rain because he couldn't wait another second. The man who held my hair when I was sick and worked double shifts so I could finish my teaching degree. But he wasn't joking. Her name was Victoria Langford, a millionaire. Actually, a multimillionaire. She owned tech companies, vacation homes in 3 countries, and a private jet. She was everything I wasn't: tall, elegant, always dressed like she was walking into a boardroom, even when she was walking her designer dogs. David had met her when he was fixing her vintage Ferrari at the garage. One conversation led to another, and apparently he had fallen madly, deeply in love. I begged him that night. I cried until my throat burned. I reminded him of the promises we made, the future we were still building, even if money was always tight. He just looked at me with pity in his eyes and said, "You deserve better than this life, Em." And so do I. He packed a bag and left before midnight. The house felt like a tomb after that. I slept on his side of the bed for weeks, just to smell his cologne on the pillow. I kept expecting him to walk back through the door and tell me it was all a terrible mistake, but he didn't. The first few months were pure survival. I taught during the day, and came home to an empty house that echoed with memories. Friends tried to help. My sister moved in for a while. They brought wine and takeout and told me I was better off. But at night, when the house was quiet, I would scroll through Victoria's Instagram photos of them on yachts, in Paris, wearing clothes that cost more than our car. David looked so happy. So different. Like the man I married had been erased and replaced by someone who belonged in that glittering world. I stopped eating properly. I lost 20 pounds. Some days I couldn't even get out of bed. The pain wasn't just heartbreak, it was humiliation. Everyone in our small town knew. The whispers followed me everywhere. Poor Emily. David traded her in for a richer model. I felt like a discarded starter wife, like our entire marriage had been a placeholder until something better came along. 6 months after he left, I decided I needed answers. Not to win him back. I wasn't that delusional anymore, but to understand how the man I loved could destroy us so easily. I hired a private investigator. Mr. Reynolds was a quiet, no-nonsense man in his 50s who promised nothing but the truth, however ugly. What he uncovered over the next 3 months shattered everything I thought I knew about my husband. At first, the reports were simple. Victoria Langford was exactly who she appeared to be: brilliant, ruthless in business, and deeply private. But David's story didn't add up. The man I married had grown up in a modest family in Ohio. High school athlete, worked his way through community college, became a mechanic because he loved fixing things with his hands. That's what he always told me. But, according to the investigator, none of that was real. David's real name wasn't even David. His real name was Alexander Voss. He was born into one of the wealthiest families in Europe, old money mixed with new tech. Billions. His father owned a conglomerate that made Victoria's empire look like a lemonade stand. Alexander had disappeared from public life 12 years ago, right around the time I met David in that little college coffee shop. The investigator showed me photos. Young Alexander at elite boarding schools. Alexander at 21, already a rising star in his family's business. Then, suddenly, nothing. He had vanished completely. New identity. New life. New country. I sat in Mr. Reynolds' office staring at those documents until the words blurred. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the papers. Everything was fake. The way we met. the stories about his family, even the way he proposed. It had all been carefully constructed. But why? That was the question that kept me up for weeks. Why would a billionaire's son throw away his entire world to live in a tiny rental house, work as a mechanic, and marry a schoolteacher who could barely afford new shoes? I needed to see him. I needed to look him in the eyes and hear the truth from his mouth. It took another month to arrange it. Victoria was hosting a charity gala in New York. I flew there with the last of my savings, wearing the only decent black dress I owned. I stood outside the venue watching limousines pull up, feeling completely out of place. Then I saw him. He looked like a stranger in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. His hair was styled differently. His posture was straighter. This wasn't the man who used to come home with grease on his hands and kiss me in the kitchen. This was Alexander Voss. I stepped in front of him as he walked toward the entrance. For a second, his face went completely pale. "Emily," he whispered. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just asked the only question that mattered. Why did you do it? Why did you pretend to be someone else for 12 years? He pulled me aside, away from the cameras and the guests. And there, in the shadows outside that glittering gala, the man I once loved told me the truth. Alexander Voss had been groomed from birth to take over his family's empire. But he hated that life, the pressure, the expectations, the constant surveillance. At 21, he made a deal with his father. Give him 5 years of freedom. No money. No name. No protection. If he could survive and build something real on his own, his father would let him choose his own path. He came to America, created the identity of David, and started over. He wanted to know what it felt like to be normal. To fall in love with someone who loved him for who he was, not what he could offer. He said he fell in love with me within weeks, that our simple life was the happiest he had ever been. But then his 5 years turned into 12. His father got sick. The family needed him back. And Victoria wasn't just a rich woman he fell for. She was the arranged match his family had chosen for him years earlier. When his father's health declined, they pressured him to return and fulfill his duty. He claimed he left me the way he did because he thought it would be easier. That if I hated him, I could move on. He thought telling me the truth would destroy me even more, knowing that our entire marriage had been built on a lie, even if the love was real. I stood there listening to him, tears streaming down my face in the cold New York night. Part of me wanted to slap him. Another part wanted to throw my arms around him and never let go. Because even after everything, I could see the pain in his eyes. The man I loved was still in there somewhere, trapped between two worlds. He told me he had watched me from a distance. He knew about my struggles, my pain. He had set up a secret account for me that I never knew about, money that had been paying my bills anonymously for months. He said he was sorry 1,000 times, but sorry didn't fix what he had broken. I walked away from him that night without saying goodbye. My heart was in pieces all over again. But this time the pieces were different. This wasn't just the pain of being left for someone richer. This was the pain of realizing the love of my life had been living a double life the entire time we were together. In the weeks that followed, I made a choice. I wasn't going to let his secrets define the rest of my life. I took the money he had secretly given me, not out of pride, but because I had suffered enough. I used it to start my own little dream, a community arts program for kids who needed somewhere to belong. The same way I once needed somewhere to belong. David or Alexander reached out a few times. He said he was trying to find a way to balance both worlds. That maybe there was still a chance for us, but some lies cut too deep. Some betrayals change the shape of love until it doesn't fit anymore. I still think about him sometimes. Not with anger anymore, but with a strange kind of sadness. For the boy who ran away from his golden cage. For the man who found real love in a simple life. And for the woman who gave her heart to someone who was never really hers to keep. Life has a way of revealing truths when you least expect them. Sometimes the person you thought you knew best turns out to be the biggest mystery of all. And sometimes the hardest thing isn't learning the truth, it's deciding what to do with it once you have. I'm still deciding, but for the first time in over a year, I'm choosing me. and that feels like the beginning of something real.